Aita for not going abroad to see my little sister. This may turn out to be quite lengthy, and I apologize for that. I did not anticipate that my first post here would revolve around this topic, but it is genuinely wearing on me. I, a 28-year-old female, have received an invitation to travel and visit my younger sister, who is just 4 years old, for a week. I adore my sister. She is truly perfect. She seems very happy living with her mother. She is incredibly clever, sweet, and kind, and I want to make it clear that I harbor no resentment towards her whatsoever. If I could, I would spend time with her constantly. My parents separated when I was quite young. My mother remarried, but the relationship has not been great, and my father, now 54, was largely absent during my childhood, as he was busy traveling the world and living his own life. I would see him on some weekends, or when he took me on vacations. He is one of those individuals who is wonderful in certain aspects, yet inexplicably poor in others. Our relationship has been unstable, to say the least. He has gone through numerous girlfriends, each with its own story. He has been described as a narcissist, although he was socially diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He is quite the socialite with many connections. I love his parents, though they are far from perfect, as they have often enabled his behavior. He has faced many challenges throughout his life and has survived difficulties in his own upbringing. I say this with respect for his struggles, and I genuinely love him for it. He can be amazing, truly amazing. There were many reasons I considered distancing myself from him until I learned that his then-girlfriend was pregnant. During a time when I was experiencing severe depression, the news of a new sister brought a glimmer of hope and excitement, albeit accompanied by fear. We had an extensive conversation where I made him outline his future plans and promise not to repeat the mistakes he made with me, particularly regarding what would happen if the relationship ended. Ultimately, I concluded that my sister was worth keeping a relationship with him. He convinced everyone that moving abroad was the best option for my sister's upbringing, creating an elaborate plan that included housing and a promising future. They had my sister in my country and stayed for about 6 to 9 months before heading back abroad, where they lived in a hotel while my father traveled back and forth to earn money, often leaving them alone for days or weeks at a time. Fast forward a few years, and my sister's mother, let's call her Alexa, is someone I find a bit eccentric, yet generally a good mom, in my opinion. While I could be wrong, every interaction I have witnessed between her and my sister has been very positive. She is attentive, fun, kind, and patient, and I have never had anything negative to say about her parenting. While her social skills may be lacking, we get along wonderfully. I should note that I am also somewhat socially awkward. I can be overly talkative, leading some to view me as rude or insincere. I tend to be excessively curious and often jump to conclusions. I have been characterized as potentially on the autism spectrum or having attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and I am currently seeking a formal diagnosis. Additionally, I cope with chronic depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, which often leads me to isolate myself. As a result, I have struggled to maintain communication with anyone who isn't physically present. Unfortunately, this means I have been largely absent from my sister's life while she has been overseas. I hardly send messages and have only called a couple of times. This situation is similar with most of my family members who do not live with me. My family is not financially well off. We run a small family business that has developed its own little community, which I truly love. We work 6 days a week with little time off, and each of us has our personal struggles, so we heavily rely on one another daily. The business does not generate enough income, which is why I also receive government benefits, though they fall short. My father has always been somewhat dubious in his financial dealings. I can't find a better way to phrase it. He has made money through questionable means, but he recently ceased these activities following a significant scare, which coincided with my sister's birth. This was after he had assured me in our earlier discussions that he would stop immediately. The relationship eventually deteriorated as they ran out of money. She found someone else. There was no infidelity. The breakup was somewhat messy, and it still is, honestly. My father moved back almost immediately and quickly began dating someone new while bouncing back and forth. He currently holds a somewhat conventional job, but now expects Alexa to return to our country, despite having convinced everyone that living abroad was best for my sister. Even after promising me that he would remain involved in her life, regardless of the relationship outcome, he is now anticipating that they follow him back here. Alexa has no savings that I am aware of, no assets. She sacrificed everything for him, taught him her trade, and supported him while he built a career, even taking on clients while she was heavily pregnant and dealing with carpal tunnel syndrome caused by the pregnancy and repeatedly carrying their child. Throughout their relationship, she never spoke ill of him to me, despite me providing her ample opportunities to do so. My father is okay with her current living situation. She has told me she will not be moving, yet according to him, he is paying for everything, which I find perplexing. She has recently apologized to me for not believing my concerns regarding my father's actions. While it was nothing that would lead to his arrest, there have been other forms of abuse, not physical, that I can recall, but a generalized ignorance of what was happening in my life. Even when my mother and I desperately sought his assistance against her then-husband during an emergency situation where my safety was at stake, he stated he didn't want to become involved and hung up. I have expressed my frustrations many times. I have not held back about my feelings. In the most recent months, he has spent only about 7 to 10 days with my sister every month to 6 weeks, which falls short of what he promised. I'm aware he will likely be FaceTiming his new girlfriend during his visit or working. Just recently, my sister was attacked by a dog on a leash. Honestly, this incident would not have happened with Alexa, who has always taken great care to introduce my sister to dogs slowly and calmly, ensuring that their owners are comfortable. I apologize for the disorganized nature of this post. There are many aspects and feelings that keep surfacing. Both have been bad-mouthing each other, but my father made a demeaning comment to my mother a couple of weeks ago, comparing her unfavorably to Alexa and accusing her of financially exploiting him, which is, to say the very least, a complete fabrication. My doubts about the situation have now been largely validated, and I am relieved that I have maintained a relatively good yet distant relationship with Alexa. He has now invited me to travel abroad with him and his parents for a week to see my sister. I have no money to spend on this trip, not for the airfare, transportation to the airport, or anything else. I cannot even afford to buy essentials I would need for or during the trip. My father has offered to cover the costs, but he claims that he cannot stay longer due to financial constraints, which confuses me. Additionally, he is not someone I can depend on for food or essentials, as he is extremely financially controlling and cheap, except on extremely rare occasions when he shows generosity, which can also be baffling. If you do not expect anything from him, he can be genuinely enjoyable to be around, occasionally treating you. I have declined his invitation, but he continues to press the issue, and I can sense a conflict brewing. I have spoken with my grandparents about it, and they suggested that it may be best not to go because I wouldn't fit in the car anyway due to the number of people. We have an excellent relationship. He mentioned that sibling time is important. I deeply miss my sister and contacted Alexa yesterday to apologize and initiate more regular communication, which I am excited about. Nonetheless, I do not want to go. The timing is all wrong for me. I literally have no money and am in a financial deficit. I cannot rely on my father to meet my needs without feeling miserable about it, and I disagree with the entire premise of this situation altogether. I'm unsure whether I can refrain from causing a scene during the trip. My sister should not have to endure that, but my father and I argue frequently. Despite everyone's concerns for his mental health, I have been trying to remain silent for the sake of peace. However, a part of me wants to confront him entirely, but everyone insists he is doing his best, stating that I am not in the wrong but should change my perspective. Over the past few years, he has manipulated me with guilt trips, and I have held my tongue because I understand he is merely human. However, as I grow older and find myself slightly older than he was when I was born, I am increasingly frustrated, only to later experience phases of understanding or simply letting it be. My sister deserves more than this. Am I not going to avoid the trip just to spite him? I do not believe that is the case, yet I feel the need to suck it up and go to see my sister. However, the thought of being in that situation, aware he is financing my visit, despite the fact that he actually owes us about $12,000 in child support after chastising me for questioning him regarding his infrequent visits, while simultaneously arguing that he is working tirelessly for my sister, is overwhelming. He claims he cannot work abroad because he wouldn't earn enough to support his family. Then how does everyone else manage? I feel as though these are all mere excuses, yet I am being told that my perspective is cynical and negative, that I am only viewing matters through a pessimistic lens, and that I should be more realistic. I apologize for the chaotic nature of this post. I'm open to discussing further in the comments. It feels as though he deliberately chose this path for his child, claiming it was the best option, dismissing our country's educational and healthcare systems, only to suddenly want her to live here. While our country is certainly not third world, the alternative is indeed better. Knowing all of this, he expects me to act like a happy family and place myself in a position where he holds complete financial control over me for an entire week. His intentions may not be malicious, but the thought fills me with dread. So, am I in the wrong for not wanting to go on this trip to see my sister next month, even though I haven't seen her since Christmas? Story 2. Fighting about money in a 3-year relationship. How do I handle this situation? My boyfriend and I are both attending medical school together. He has a significantly greater amount of self-earned money than I do and invests it all into our education. He expects me to maintain his lifestyle, mainly because he relies on my support while paying my half of the expenses. I do not have the financial resources to do this. He is aware of my situation, and I have made an effort to communicate this clearly at every opportunity. It is feasible to manage with fewer resources, but he is unwilling to take that risk. He also does not want me to scale back because that would prevent me from studying together with him, which has been a crucial aspect of our success. Consequently, he wants me to use his equipment, but then he becomes resentful because I am not contributing equally. This is a complex situation. He benefits from the energy I invest in him and because I prioritize him, but I also rely on his hard-earned money and cannot contribute my fair share financially. I am uncertain about how to navigate the growing number of disagreements. I, 24 years old, female, and my boyfriend, 29 years old, male, have shared a loving and supportive relationship for 3 years. We met during medical school. He is a soldier and secured his university position through the Army. This arrangement provides him with a stable income. In many countries, the military offers positions at dental or medical schools along with regular pay during training, in exchange for a commitment to serve in the Army as a dentist or doctor afterwards. He also had several years of work experience before starting university. This is where a significant disparity arises. He entered school with savings and earns a steady salary, while I do not. My education is primarily funded through a modest scholarship, and my parents, whom I am grateful for, as I could not pursue this career without their support, along with a small part-time job. I would work more hours, but my studies are incredibly demanding, leaving little room for additional work. I had some savings, but certainly not as much as he does. This whole situation contributes to our second major difference. Everything must go exceptionally well in his education. He cannot fail any major exams or exceed the minimum study duration. Otherwise, it would severely limit his specialty options and where the Army will assign him later. There is a ranking among all medical students financed by the Army. The better one performs, the more choices they have. This is crucial for him as he aspires to be a surgeon, and that opportunity would be lost if anything doesn't proceed flawlessly. On the other hand, my situation is relatively more flexible. Studying longer would incur additional costs and be frustrating, but it wouldn't significantly affect my future career choices, since external factors usually do not consider how long it took, just that you successfully complete the program. Additionally, my desired specialty is significantly less competitive. These differences have understandably influenced our educational experiences and the dynamics of our relationship. We met in our first semester and have been essentially inseparable ever since. There is not a single exam we have not taken together or prepared for together. Whenever significant assessments approached, our priorities were clear. His success was paramount. The importance of his passing was greater than mine. His future depended on it, while my stakes were lower. This commitment was not something I was forced into. Rather, I chose it because I care about him, our relationship, and our future, and I want him to realize his dreams just as I aspire to do. Over the past 3 years, this has led to several instances where I risked my own academic performance to ensure his success. Thankfully, this has not yet resulted in a failure, but it has been perilously close on several occasions. I share this to illustrate that he has consistently been my top priority, and I continuously put him first. The primary issue that has increasingly arisen between us is financial. As you might expect, our education is quite expensive. In the country where we study, it is mandatory to purchase extensive equipment and materials for practical courses and examinations. We both covered the costs for the essentials that everyone needs, which are already quite pricey. However, if one wishes to avoid any risks, there is an abundance of additional items that can greatly improve the chances of passing. Understandably, he could never forgive himself if he failed to achieve his dreams due to being too frugal to acquire specific products or materials that might have aided his success. Thus, he has made significant expenditures to ensure this does not occur. He has purchased virtually everything that could be beneficial, and we have accumulated a great deal of equipment to practice at home. When I say we, I refer to the fact that I assisted in locating this equipment, which was not always easy, and bringing it home, sometimes it was quite laborious. But he has financed the vast majority of it, as I simply cannot afford these items. Outside of university, the situation is similar. He is older, has a steady income, and is somewhat established in life. He has moved beyond the phase of being financially struggling and understandably does not wish to live like a broke college student at this point in his life. Thus, he owns a car and frequently uses it, while I rely solely on public transport when I am by myself. During stressful times, he prefers to order takeout rather than cook, whereas I opt for simple pasta when alone. He also wants to engage in outings outside of school every so often, which I cannot afford on my own. None of this would be problematic if he were not expecting me to share in his lifestyle. When we study together in the days leading up to an exam, he does not grasp why I would waste time cooking, and thus expects me to accompany him for takeout. If we are going places together, he expects me to keep pace with him to avoid wasting time, so he usually drives me in his car. He wants me to practice at home even though it is his equipment, and sometimes I feel obliged to use it because I sacrificed my practice time at university to assist him, thus needing to compensate for that time if I wish to have a chance of passing. The central problem is that, in many if not most instances, I cannot repay him for these expenses — food, gas money, car costs, equipment, and materials — due to my limited financial resources compared to his. We both hold the belief that individuals should pay for their own expenses, which creates the expectation that I should reimburse him. I want to clarify that I am making every effort. I have depleted every bit of my savings at this point, spending every last penny each month. I have purchased materials on credit and borrowed from my parents. You can imagine the situation. I have utilized every cent I had. The issue is becoming increasingly prominent because he has reached a similar point of exhaustion. The bulk of the money has been allocated, roughly 90, to university-related expenses, materials, equipment, etc., rather than on lifestyle choices, which are merely a minor component. He has even had to borrow money himself recently. However, as our classes continue and we still need numerous materials and equipment, he is now more reliant on having me pay him back when he buys additional items, but I still cannot do so. I have always been open and honest about my situation. Whenever we examine or purchase something that I know I cannot afford, I explain. I won't be able to reimburse you completely for this. I understand that you require it, and I will support you in every way I can. I have no expectation of using it, and it is perfectly fine if I do not get the opportunity. I cannot contribute to this financially in the same way that you can. Nevertheless, he usually wants me to use the equipment for the sake of practicing together, which certainly benefits him. Or at times, it becomes necessary for me to do so, given that I sacrificed my practice time at university to assist him, as noted previously. And despite my efforts at clear communication, his frustration about my uneven financial contribution persists. What has transpired are escalating arguments and increasing frustration, because while he does not want to proceed without the additional resources, to avoid the risk of failure, He also wants me to work alongside him using that equipment, but expects me to compensate him for it, which often is simply not possible for me, at least not in full. Each instance of this has escalated his anger, with him continuously expressing that I just do not understand since I do not earn my own money and am not fully self-sufficient. He is frustrated that I expect him to carry more of the financial burden because he earns more when in fact, that is not my intention. However, this feeling has emerged due to the current circumstances. He is primarily upset because he believes I could have been earning my own income by now had I opted to join the army. I have considered this path. I completed an internship to explore the possibility and engaged with the recruitment staff. However, I did not pursue it further as it would have necessitated pausing my education to undergo military training first. This would have resulted in us being in different semesters, preventing us from preparing together and sharing the workload, so I do not believe he would have passed all his exams to this point if that had been the case. Despite this, he does not perceive it in that way and remains angry, believing I could have found an alternative solution. Honestly, I am unsure how to manage this situation any longer. Our discussions on this topic never yield any progress, and I sense increasing resentment on his part, as he feels I am relying on him to provide for both of us. He expects me to take action, whether that be borrowing more money, though I cannot ask my parents for additional funds, given that I have 4 siblings, and there reaches a point where they cannot contribute more. Joining the army, which I have explained would ultimately be disadvantageous for him, or devising an alternative strategy. However, there is not much I can realistically undertake, primarily because of the limited time I have outside of university. Please excuse any grammatical errors. English is not my first language. I apologize for the length of this. I am simply expressing everything, and at this point, I am unsure which details are significant. I will attempt to condense this later. How do I address this situation? I would appreciate any advice or thoughts on how to navigate this. Story 3. Scaring someone at the gym. Hello, I am 18. However, this post is quite mild and addresses a situation that many other guys tend to fear. It has been about a year now, and everything has been going reasonably well, with no major consequences arising from it. Yet, I have found myself developing feelings for a girl I frequently see around campus. My recollection of the events is not the best. Internally, I am probably attempting to forget them. Nevertheless, they frequently resurface at random moments, bothering me significantly. I really liked this girl, and I continue to see her around the college campus, often thinking that I had a fair chance with her based on her neutral interest and mixed signals toward me. While we often crossed paths, I managed to muster enough courage to strike up a conversation, which, to be honest, went reasonably well. I was primarily trying to build rapport, because I assumed I would inevitably see her again, as I usually do. Some days, we would encounter each other at the college gym, but I never really initiated any meaningful conversation there, just the same boring neutral waves over and over. After we talked, I discovered that we had attended the same high school and had some of the same teachers. I felt quite excited about that. I thought I might have a chance with her, especially since she sometimes smiled in my direction. Yet, like many of my actions, these signals were often misinterpreted, leading to misunderstandings, and things usually stayed at a surface level. Eventually, things came to a head one day during the summer term when I fortuitously shared class days with her and bumped into her at the gym. It is worth noting that she is not particularly unpopular, and neither am I. Despite having similar interests in technology and fields of study, we traveled in different social circles. Reflecting on this brings forth some regret about writing it down. This specific paragraph describes events from a single day during one painful encounter. Typically, I possess enough confidence to approach a girl and request their number. Most of the time, I am successful. However, this particular time, I simply could not bring myself to do it. My nerves were all in a twist, and I overthought a lot, which is definitely one of my flaws. This resulted in a desperate and creepy demeanor, leading to awkwardness in the gym. As we all know, girls can certainly sense that, and I really wasn't being myself. I guess my eagerness for a relationship was getting the best of me since I was getting tired of being single, especially when so many people I know are in relationships. I had been dragging my feet for too long, rather than allowing things to develop naturally. But hey, you understand how it feels to be an angst-ridden, pent-up kid who tends to overthink things. Both she and I know the gym staff. I'm more of an acquaintance with them, while she knows them a bit better. The reason for my heightened anxiety about asking her out on that specific day was that I had a calculus exam looming over me, and it was the final week of the semester. I made an internal vow that if I didn't ask her out, I would forget about it entirely, as I had more pressing concerns for the semester. While I was pondering my options and attempting to engage with her, the gym staff I knew were subtly trying to steer me away from her. It is exhausting to always initiate conversations and push personal boundaries to interact with others. I should have taken that as my first hint when one of the gym staff members urged me to exercise with him. In my head, I was too busy contemplating ways to initiate a conversation to recognize this until hindsight hit me. I wasn't going to let another opportunity slip away. I could hardly make any progress with dating, so I figured I might as well give it another shot. What did I have to lose? At some point, I realized something. I had a gut feeling that she and one of the gym regulars were definitely discussing me. I remember, in a vain attempt to make conversation, it fizzled out. This part is incredibly disorienting for me because this marked the peak of the situation. From this point forward, things eased up a bit, but this embarrassment weighs heavily on me right now. I recall leaving the gym feeling disheartened and sad about yet another failed attempt. It was clear I was making her uncomfortable, so it was best to step back and move on. The regular gym goer and the staff member who had previously diverted me gave me strange looks, seemingly having a conversation among themselves, with her being almost protectively positioned. It was crystal clear at that point that I had made her uncomfortable. Nonetheless, in a last-ditch effort to prove to myself, God, or whatever higher power exists, I decided I would keep my promise to at least ask her for her number. Since that was clearly not going to happen, instead, I resolved to apologize for my previous actions. What did I foolishly do? I thought I could somehow clear the air and turned around to attempt to apologize after I had already walked away. It was like a perpendicular hallway, so I was momentarily out of sight, but I froze in indecision again. Ultimately, I think I should just end it all right now, to be honest. When I returned to apologize, I simply couldn't do it. It was too overwhelming. After my previous failed attempts and clearly having made her uncomfortable, the thought of approaching her again was too much. My intention was to apologize for how my actions had clearly made her feel uneasy, but let's be real. We all know how that scenario looks. I was walking back to her looking like a deer caught in headlights, resembling nothing more than a complete creep. As it happened, she was quickly ushered out of the gym by the frequent gym goer. The staff approached me and offered a stern lecture while escorting me toward the building exit. I apologize if my way of recounting all of this makes me seem utterly selfish, but I am trying to be as honest as I can. The staff member was quite serious with me about how I had made her uncomfortable, and whenever I lagged even slightly behind, he would quickly say, "Walk with me to maintain pace." I felt like a criminal. I felt like a terrible person and a terrible human being. It was just awful. Awful doesn't even begin to capture how I felt about the entire situation. It was simply dreadful. It felt as if I had committed a crime against humanity at that moment. The gym staff member reassured me during his stern talk, stating that my crush was being harassed and followed, but he also affirmed, "I know you well enough to realize you don't do that. You're a good kid." He even went so far as to say that it was challenging to determine who was truly causing her fear since it clearly wasn't me. He scolded me regarding my apparent ineptitude with women based on this single encounter. This stings a lot because I have frequented that gym with some girlfriends in the past. While this detail may be unrelated, I wanted to mention it because it feels like a vivid memory from that conversation. Nevertheless, he emphasized that she was already taken, and that was that for that traumatic experience. We left, and it was a lot to process. This constitutes the main event. I'm using parentheses here to wrap it up so I don't conflate events. That evening when I returned home, I immediately opened up to my parents about what had transpired. This post is already lengthy, but I have spoken about this topic with some close friends and even someone involved in an extracurricular activity because I felt the need to express how poorly I acted and how I made that girl feel. I even returned to the gym the next day to apologize to the staff about my behavior. They reassured me, stating that worse situations had occurred, and following that apology, I avoided returning for about 3 months. I have even shared posts about this incident on other accounts, although they were deleted, and it became clear to me that it would be better to leave the situation alone. Time is supposed to heal wounds and similar sentiments, but as I mentioned earlier, moving in similar social circles complicates things. I have consciously avoided any purposeful interactions with her following all of that. I was not trying to exacerbate the already complicated situation. The issue is, as a guy with numerous acquaintances and her similarly having a network of friends, we frequently run into one another. A lot. I appreciate that she has not escalated things and allowed the scenario to lie dormant, but every time I see her, it does not bode well for me. Once again, recklessly disregarding my better judgment, this was a foolish move. Do not follow my lead. I hastily apologized to her without saying anything further while she was in the company of friends. This happened because we were sitting relatively close to each other at the cafeteria. Sometimes, while I am deep in conversation with someone else, she also greets me, and I excuse myself to avoid any further complications. It is as if everyone keeps advising to never interact with this person ever again in situations like this, but I am actively trying to avoid her, and yet, I still see her often. This reality became most apparent this semester. On the very first day of school, the first day, we coincidentally crossed paths in line while paying for our gym fees at the business office. How ridiculous is that? Of all the moments we could meet while taking care of our class registration, we ended up in the same area. This time, I mustered the courage to apologize yet again, given our close proximity in line. Perhaps I should have respected the silence, but I figured I would risk it. She acknowledged my initial apology with a simple, "It's okay," but when I apologized a second time, her response was still neutral. She pointed out, "You've already said sorry about this before." Days spent at the gym became an ordeal. Despite everyone insisting those prior events are now long forgotten, I constantly remind myself, I'll go early on Mondays and Fridays. Those are less common times. Yet, she always seems to appear just as I am leaving. Thank God. Even though we encountered each other again, our gazes still met. Awkward glances were exchanged before I hastily moved along. Who knows, perhaps another major misunderstanding will arise, and I'll end up on some sort of list in the future. Regardless, I have to live with the consequences of my actions. Thank you for taking the time to read this post. It is incredibly embarrassing for me to share, but if you take anything away from it, let it be this. Act decisively, do not hesitate, and avoid dragging your feet. I know that many people fear similar scenarios, but if you are confident, do not hesitate to read the room and be mindful of not trying to clear the air unnecessarily. Feel free to offer your critique in the comments. I can take it. It has been a full year, and I see her less often, but I sincerely wish her all the best. Story 4. Aita for quitting my job after being told my mental illness is fake. For context, I am a 25-year-old male and have post-traumatic stress disorder protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I was offered a position with Bad Transport Company LLC, and I will keep all names confidential for the purpose of this post. I was initially a client of this company for about a year, receiving transportation to doctor's appointments and such on a weekly basis for my therapist and psychiatrist. Eventually, I was offered a position as a driver. I required rides because I did not own a car, and was provided with a company vehicle once I was hired. Keep in mind that this entire process felt quite unusual. I had not taken any classes or completed requirements, yet I received emails claiming I had earned certifications, despite never having taken any exams associated with those certifications. I was also never informed about what the job expected from me or what my salary would be. Eventually, I was assigned my first few trips. I discovered that they expected me to work 6 or 7 days a week, starting as early as 4 a.m., and to remain available as late as necessary. One of my co-workers was working from 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. for reference. After learning this information and encountering some mental health challenges related to the new job, my doctors advised me to request an accommodation for part-time work. I sent a text to my boss detailing my concerns and requesting accommodations. I did not receive any updates regarding my request until Friday, 3 days after I had initially made it. On that Friday, I visited my boss's office, which is located in their home, to submit paperwork concerning the trips I had completed that week. I was immediately lectured by the boss, who stated that mental illness is not real, therapy is a scam, and that I needed to put on my big boy pants and deal with it. Numerous comments were made, prompting me to reinforce that I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and require accommodations. They stated, "Someone held a gun to my head once, and you don't see me crying about it." I left that day determined to continue working, which leads us to Tuesday. On Tuesday, I received a phone call asking me to accept 2 rides for Wednesday, which I agreed to. However, we encountered an issue. My company car had been reclaimed due to an insurance issue, or so I was informed. I was not provided with specific details, but I simply communicated that I did not have a vehicle and would need them to supply me with one. They said they would call me back, and indeed they did. I received a call from my co-worker, who had a car available for me to use and had the necessary paperwork for my 2 trips. I drove down to their residence with my wife, who dropped me off so I could collect my papers and the car. I was then informed that one of my 2 trips had been sent back, meaning it was denied by our company, and another company would be taking that ride. I lost out on money, but it was not the end of the world, so I returned home with the car and my trip scheduled for the following day. Upon checking my texts a few hours later before going to bed, I noticed a heated discussion in the group chat. Someone was upset about the trip being sent back, and I saw a message stating, "Jim Bob, co-owner, called OP and OP said he couldn't do it," followed by my boss adding, "OP didn't want to work, so I had Jim Bob send the trip back." Other comments were made among them and the co-workers, but the essence was clear. Everyone was turning against me and disseminating misinformation about what had transpired. I confronted them about the inaccuracies and corrected them, albeit somewhat harshly, stating, "You know that is unacceptable. I accepted the rides and informed you that I did not possess a company car. It was only when I arrived to collect the paperwork that I discovered my trip had been sent back after I had already begun preparing for it. Do not throw me under the bus simply because I require medical accommodations. That is not fair." I found myself being targeted by my co-workers, condemned for talking back to the boss. I became fed up, and after discussing the situation with my therapist and my immediate family, my wife and mother, I crafted a text when I was in a more composed state. When I visited the office to submit my paperwork, I was scolded by who I assume is the boss's husband, claiming that mental health and therapy are essentially a hoax and that I simply need to suck it up. I honestly anticipated better treatment. I held genuine respect for this company. I have been a patron on and off for some time. I have been transported by several of you, and I truly believed that everyone cared about their clients. That is why I was open to trying work again when a cool person invited me here. I have been grappling with my health issues for years and am protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. When I needed reduced hours, I expressed that need. I should not have to justify myself for doing so, but I will not remain silent while someone disseminates false information about me or attempts to turn others against me. Every time I check my phone, there is yet another argument or an unprofessional exchange happening, and I have only been here for, what, a week? Moreover, I have overheard clients being disparaged over the radio, which is simply disgraceful. Those radios operate while clients are in the vehicles, listening in. Do you have any idea how that must affect them, knowing that the very individuals responsible for assisting them are discussing them disparagingly? The treatment of people here is shameful, truly shameful. You can find someone else to take my rides because I will not be driving for you any longer. Not when management exhibits such disregard for their employees. I sent that message and received a 5-paragraph response from Jim Bob. It discussed how costly it had been to facilitate my onboarding and to work with all the brokers. The message was in all caps and came across as if it had been written by a child. To quote, "Every test you had to take in turn of $400, and you have the nerve to work 2 days and quit. You should be ashamed of yourself. And you should have then called off your second day of work. What a jerk. If you knew you were not going to work, why waste everybody's time and money?" Just tell the truth, this job was too much for you. You cannot meet the standards as a driver. I recognize that this seems absurd, but it is indeed spelled and phrased exactly as I have presented. I feel as though I was consistently discriminated against and criticized for my mental illness, yet I am beginning to feel regret about quitting and would like another perspective. A few friends have suggested that I contact the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and report them, but I also understand that it can be challenging for a small business to navigate such situations. Am I the antagonist?